Who needs a national health service when a scourge like temporary irregularity can be so effectively dealt with by the private sector? And now it's time to meet our studio guest. He's a man of such wide interests that anything he isn't interested in isn't interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the wider-ranging intellects of the age, Jonathan Miller. Jonathan, what have we learned tonight? Tell me about temporary irregularity. Why do we laugh at it? Why do we laugh at it?
Well, I think we laugh at anything to do with the bowels for some reason, or we laugh at it in England. The Americans don't laugh at it. You see, the Americans have commercials about it, and they don't laugh at it. In fact, as soon as they hear the English laugh at it, they say, "You're always going in for this bathroom humor." And they get very worried, and they always think it's very infantile.
Farts aren't funny in America, are they?
Farts aren't funny, and really nothing to do with the bowels. I mean, in fact, the bowels and the bladder are really regarded as very infantile. It means that you haven't really got to some sort of primary relationship with the genital apparatus. Have you?
Well, I'm just going to ask, is in your experience, can farting ruin a relationship?
No, I think it's obviously embarrassing. It's odd that it should be so embarrassing. I mean, why there are certain things that we do we're not embarrassed by. Sweating, you see, for example, one doesn't have to somehow feel obliged to cover it up in some way. But there are certain things which escapes, which we somehow feel very embarrassed by. We're much more embarrassed, of course, by much more material incontinence than we are by incontinence of wind.
What do you suppose?
So tell me more. You know.
Speaking hypothetically, suppose you're in some sort of social situation, and the ultimate horror does occur, and you let accidentally, well, it would have to be accidentally, wouldn't it? Break wind, as it were. Do you have a technique yourself? Do you look at someone else accusingly?
Well, no. While we are on the topic, I mean, have you noticed that you can do it on airplanes and no one notices it? The thing is, you see, that I don't know whether they've calculated it in this way, but the din of jet engines is tuned to just about the right level, so that you can fart more or less ad lib at 35,000 feet anyway, and really attract no attention at all. So and for some reason, farts at that height seem to be odorless as well. So that really you can do it more or less ad lib. Is there anything I can get you, sir?
I hadn't noticed, but next time I
fly,
I'll try.
Just feel free to let fly. It worked. I mean, I started it very tentatively in my early days of flying, and now I have absolutely no embarrassment about it at all.
But no American has ever done it in any circumstances.
Well, it's certainly not something which you... But there was one wonderful occasion when someone did cover up for someone else. People really feel much more obliged to cover up for the offender than the offender does. There's a wonderful story which Alan Bennett told me about. I think someone farted at a party in Garsington. In Garsington.
He farted in Garsington.
It farted in Garsington. And Lady Otteline Morrell was sitting at this dinner party, you see, and there was a spirited conversation going on, and Bernard Shaw and so forth, and suddenly it occurred, and there was a silence, and Lady Otteline just said, "Yes," and treated it as if it was merely a contribution to the conversation.
Americans, they are neurotic about health, aren't they?
Well, yes, they are neurotic about health. They're neurotic about dying. They're neurotic about not being beautiful, and about not being immortal.
A lot of them are. I mean, it occurs to me maybe they're right. When you are in America, or anyway, the north of America, the east and west coast, you do see a lot of fit, young-looking people. Are they right?
Well, I mean, it's fine if that's what they want to do, but they spend so much time preserving life that they haven't got much left over for leading it, you know, so that they're endlessly pounding along. For example, there's a middle green lawn down the middle of San Vicente in Los Angeles, and you see hundreds of people endlessly pounding down this track, and I always see them somehow pursued just about 3 paces behind by the figure of death, saying, I can keep up, I can bide my time, just run on, I'll be with you, baby. And it just seems absurd to run away from one's mortality. In that
They
way.
do want to live forever, don't they?
They want to live forever, and they want to look beautiful, and they want to be famous.
I kind of admire it, it's just that it bores me. I mean, like Willa Sands, for example. Everybody laughed at poor Willa, and I actually rather admire her. She wants to be happy, and she goes out there and she makes absolutely... She's determined to be happy.
She obviously hasn't lived forever, has she? I mean, she looks like something that's been looted from the Valley of the Kings.
But I gather that on the whole you don't like Willa's show.
Well, I've never seen it. This is the first time I've seen it. You know, that channel that is not seen, really, by anything more than a few people who have that particular cable.
I kind of gathered that, you know. You were, when you were first into the US with Beyond the Fringe, you were a social lion, weren't you? Did you go out to 3 parties a night with the hostesses chasing you and all that
Yes, we
stuff?
got lionized for about 3 or 4 months, but because the attention span of the American socialite is so short that after about 3 months we simply ceased to be interesting. But we were lionized, yes, certainly, for about 3 months, and we got invited out a great deal.
They party a lot, don't they? The rich Americans are out every night. Yeah.
Yes, I think it goes on. I mean, but that, I think, the level that she talks about is something which is not very smart, I think, although she likes to talk about the people at Saratoga. But even the very smart and the grand and the upper class party a great deal. And celebrity matters enormously in New York. And people feel that they've died if they're socially invisible.
Let's talk about celebrity for a bit, and how it differs from fame. Of course, you're famous too. Now, what is fame? Is it something you set out to achieve?
Fame is simply something that happens as a result of doing this. If you're seen on a screen which goes into lots and lots of people's homes, and if you can, by some sort of arrangement, arrange for one lot of people to be silent while you're sort of shooting your mouth off, and that includes me as well, that is what fame is. And it feeds on itself and magnifies itself, and the more you're seen on that, the more you get recognized in the street, and the more you get recognized in the street, the more attractive you are to the people who do programs like this to invite you back again, and so that the whole thing becomes this vicious circle of celebrity and fame.
What do you make of Silvio Santos and the transvestites of Brazil?
Well, it's quite extraordinary, really. I mean, I think that it tends to happen in countries where, in fact, there's an enormous amount of poverty. I think that wouldn't happen in countries like ours.
Silvio or the transvestites?
Well, I think it's the whole enchilada. You know, it happens there because it's going out to a vast, illiterate, poor population who really, because of their poverty, haven't got any standards and haven't got any a way of discriminating what's happening at all.
But Australia's a terrifically rich place, and it's full of people like Silvio on TV, and indeed transvestites.
Yeah, now, the transvestites in Australia are a very prominent feature, certainly. And I often wonder whether, in fact, transvestism isn't, in fact, the mirror image of a society which sets such an enormous store by masculinity. Once you have a society which is endlessly shaping up in this very macho way and sets a huge store by men being very manly and big and brutal and beer drinking and able to fend for themselves, that it secretes as a sort of exhaust in the system. Transvestism as some sort of, it's almost like a civil rights protest on the part of those who simply don't wish to participate.
When you got on to secretes and exhaust there, I thought you were going to... Do you think Silvio will make a good president?
Well, I mean, I don't think presidents matter very much anymore. I think that most of the politics of the world in that continent, and that includes, I think, you know, the North American continent as well, is really carried on by other institutions and by other people.
Well, I just asked because our own parliament here, I speak of our, and said I've lived here for a long time, and I'm looking forward to this great moment when our own parliament here gets on television. What's that going to do to the MPs? Are they going to turn into TV stars, they work on their image and all that stuff?
I think there'll be certain people who'll do that, but I think that it probably won't affect it very much, I think. I mean, I think it'll make slightly more sense of that awful sort of animal braying which you hear on the radio. When you hear, when you actually see it spread out, actually, and you can see that there are actually people doing it. But it's the sound of it on radio which is so horrible, I think. No, I don't think it'll make any difference at all. I mean, I think that we do have a very complex, rich, ancient democracy which holds these things in place, whereas these are, in South America, you have very fragile, brittle democracies, and I think that their television is extremely powerful in that way.
Well, the Japanese admire English parliamentary system and indeed the English language extremely, indeed inordinately. You see the effort they're actually putting into English, and the strange thing is that in the last 2 generations, the Japanese have got very, very good at learning English, which for them is an extremely difficult language.
Yes, it's very hard to know why it's a difficult language, and these L's and these R's and so forth. I mean, I just think that it's difficult if that's the language you've learned at the outset. But I think that what's so fascinating is their obsession with Western habits and Western clothes and so forth. I remember being once in a clothes shop in Piccadilly, idly browsing through the raincoats, and there was a squeak outside, and an enormous charabanc drew up, and I could see the profiles of about 40 Japanese, all with briar pipes, which they'd got from Dunhills. And the door swept open, and then there was this sort of locust whirr, as they entered the store, and they dispersed to all the racks, and there was this sort of locust and everything had been cleared, and there they were in their barbades and their pipes, and the whole thing drove off, and the store was completely emptied of this. You see them flooding in and out of elevators, all wearing these Lacoste shirts and all very buttoned down, but all talking Japanese. And it's like having extraterrestrials coming here and going straight to Burberry's, and it's very odd why they should want to dress like us. I just don't know.
Jonathan, we're running out of time, and it's been a pleasure talking to you. I think I'd hesitate before I flew with you in an aircraft.
Having said that, you see, I'm never going to be able to get onto British Airways again. Or I'll be in the hold from now on. Would you like to go excess baggage, sir? They'll never let me on again. I shouldn't have said that at all.
Jonathan, I have to say thank you very much, Jonathan Miller. That's never happened. It's a big subject, Bruce.